Good morning and welcome to H3 TV this week, where I greet you from my daughter's home in St. Louis Park. I do not have a guest today, but I did have a thought. And so I was thinking, I don't want to skip H3 TV. I'm out of my office, but what I was thinking about this morning is how do we get to a place of hope, health, and happiness? And initially, this was created as a keynote as we came out of COVID and as we were living in COVID, recognizing people were feeling hopeless, unhealthy, and unhappy. And this week, I've just been fully aware of how isolated people are. I think I always know that, but traveling back to Minnesota and reconnecting with people, I was thinking a huge way that I've always stayed hopeful, healthy, and happy. And I think one of the huge ways we bring it back into the workplace is connection. We need human connection. And it doesn't matter if we're a little kid on a playground or a senior citizen living alone or a middle-aged or young person working. I have gone on many walks since I've gotten to Minnesota. I've been blessed to be able to connect, especially with family and a couple of friends, and done some work. And what I started thinking about is we have lost the art of connection. And so I'm curious. So please comment below. How are you connecting and how are you staying connected in your personal life, but more importantly, in your professional life? And I've had many conversations about what work was like in the 80s and 90s. And at that time, the late 80s and early 90s, I worked downtown at Piper Jaffray for 9 years in downtown Minneapolis. And that going to work for all of us isn't always joyful or exciting or wonderful. But a big part of what drove us to want to go to work was those connections, those conversations around the water cooler, which doesn't exist anymore because everyone brings their own bottle of water. Everyone has their own headphones and they're living in their own thing. And I remember the relationships at Piper that we would go to happy hour, that we'd go to the farmer's market, that we'd walk through the skyways. And I'm curious, how are you curating, creating a culture of connection, which then I think that connection can lead to living hopeful, healthy, and happy. And so I was working with a client a couple of weeks ago and I was saying, what are you doing in your workspace? Do you have courage boards out in the lunchroom? I think we're so used to, I eat alone, I work from home, I get my own water, I take my own selfie, that we have lost this connection. And there is a collective loneliness in the world. I was out walking my dog this morning and everybody I walked past had headphones in. And there's nothing wrong with listening to music or podcasts, but that art of just casual conversation, a good morning, a hello, a smile, a friendly gesture that could lead to a relationship, to a friendship, to a connection, to a coworker. I just am very curious about what companies and organizations are doing to create a culture of connectedness, because I think when we feel alone and isolated, it's easier to feel more hopeless because we get in our heads and everything becomes amplified and we think more about ourselves and what am I going to get and how's my day going to turn out. But what if we think about how can we collectively collaborate to connect? Our youngest son recently, he works for a construction company in the Twin Cities, but works up in Duluth. And he was saying, like, I think once a quarter now, I don't think it's once a month, I think it's once a quarter, they're making bunk beds. But at first he was like, I don't know about this, whatever. And then he's like, it ended up being super fun. Like they're making bunk beds for homeless shelters, but everyone's getting together and they're talking and they're relating and they're working. And we were talking the other day and it was like many people at work like to keep their personal life and their work life separate. And it's okay to have boundaries. I'm all about have healthy boundaries. But are you so separate that you feel isolated? Are you so separate that you have forgotten how to have teamwork and how to collaborate and have a conversation and disagree and process and move forward? And I think a big way to stay hopeful, healthy, and happy is to have collaboration with people you agree with and people you don't agree with, to just learn from each other and be in community. And I don't know, I just felt a heaviness, a sadness about the lack of connection. And I think being hopeful is being able to process out loud. Sometimes life can feel overwhelming or work can feel overwhelming. But if someone says, hey, I got you, I'll hang out with you, I'll work on this project with you, I won't leave you till we get done. You're not going to be sitting in the office alone or sitting at your desk at home alone. And I'm just wondering individually, what are you doing to connect with people? And are you so closed into your small circle of family or friends that you have forgotten to outreach, forgotten to reconnect, or to invite somebody new in? I mean, there are a lot of lonely people. I'm just so aware of the magnitude of loneliness, even in crowds, even in audiences, even in airports, even in parks, that everybody's kind of walking their own path. And I don't think we were created to walk our own path. I think we were created to walk in community and collaboration and conversation, of being connected. Whenever I come to town, whenever possible, I always reach out to a number of my speaker friends and just say, hey, I'm going to be in town. Do you want to get together for breakfast or meet at my daughter's house for a cup of coffee? And I just think it is so needed. And I know people are busy and more people will say no than yes, and that's okay. But I want to keep trying to connect, whether that's in the community I live now in Florida or in the community when I come back to Minnesota. And it's partially why I'm creating a Vistage group, is because people need other people's perspective, because we get in our own head and life gets overwhelming, number one. Number two, we can't always see the path out or the best steps. And maybe we need to hear from 20 other people and tell 18 of them, that's ridiculous, that'll never work. But if we get one or two good ideas, one or two connections or community, I think that's how we're meant to be. And I think we find happiness in that. And sometimes we find happiness just being goofy with people. And I remember when I worked at Piper, my dear friend Maria and I worked there together, and we would ride down the elevators together and we would just laugh. We could have the most stressful day. During the time I worked for Piper, they went through 3 sets of layoffs. And though I never got laid off, it was super hard. It's super hard to watch people be walked out of work. It's super hard to get up in the morning and go to work wondering, will I be next? But having people to walk through that with, to laugh about the silly things, to go to the farmer's market and literally smell the flowers, well, it made it all worth it. And I just feel concerned. I'm curious about business organizers. I'm curious about, and that's my friend Cheryl ringing the doorbell. So I should go answer it because that's part of my community and who I'm inviting. So I'm going to run. But what are you doing individually to outreach to somebody? What are you doing as an organization to create a community of connectedness, which creates a H3 culture, which is hopeful, healthy, and happy? So I'm Annie, and I would love it if you'd share in the comments, what are you doing to connect, and what is your company doing to help you connect, collaborate, and have conversations? Have a great week, and thanks for tuning in. How do I turn off? All right, see you later. Happy H3. Keep being hopeful.